Welcome to the Paper Trail, where we follow the journey, my journey, through the world of a CEO of a mortgage note fund. I'm Chris 70, and after years of buying, managing, and selling notes with 70 investments, I'm here to share the real stories behind the deals. What went right, what went wrong, and what I wish I knew earlier. From non-performing loans to seller financing to private lending, this show is about more than strategies, about growing your business, learning to follow the paper trail, and doing the due diligence that separates the pros from the rest. Now, let's hit the trail running. Hey, George, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Hope you're doing well as well, Chris.
I am. Is that a coffee you're drinking or
It is coffee. It's still
okay.
11 a.m. where I'm at, and well, like most commercial people in commercial real estate, I pretty much drink coffee throughout the day.
Yeah, so I come from the commercial and I know that feeling. So the question we internally we always joke about with people in the company is, do you black, cream, or cream and sugar? What's the person's preference?
Yeah, black, straight black for me.
Okay.
Although, one of the younger agents in the offices got me in the afternoon switching to a mushroom type coffee, which I'll
Okay.
see if that lasts or not.
Okay. I at one point in time was doing like the ones with like the nitrogen that you could do almost from like a
Yeah.
kegerator or whatnot, the
Yep.
ice. Man, that would make the hair on the back of my neck stand. It was
Yeah.
so caffeinated that I'm like, I can't do that anymore. But yeah. Hey, again, thanks for coming on. Why don't you start out letting people know a little bit about your story and how you got into real estate?
Okay. Well, like a lot of people, I actually kind of fell into it by accident. And my story started right out of college. I had a company that I had started in college and was working on it, but it was very seasonal. And for a college kid, it was fantastic. It allowed me to travel during college and do some other stuff. But, right after graduating, it was the wrong season or slow season for that business. And I had some free time. A friend of mine called me up and said, I'm working at this real estate company and they need some help. Are you interested in, a short-term part-time gig? I said, sure, why not? Not doing anything else. Next thing I know, that turned into 30 plus years of a career. I got offered a permanent position in 2 weeks there and determined that it was a good opportunity and wanted to know more about the industry and kind of just went from there and grew from there.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, like you said, most of us fall into this. And I was in college, I was going for engineering, and then towards the end of I think it was like start my senior year, halfway through, I realized, I was a civil, so I'm like, do I really want to design bridges the rest of my life? And then end up doing, construction management and getting into real estate. And I'm like, man, not glad I did that change
Mhm.
because I
Yeah.
would have been bored just sitting there. But as you mentioned, most of us fall into this space with that kind of falling in. What kind of commercial, what does CBI do?
CBI is a full service commercial brokerage company. Now we do quite a bit of retail. We do leasing, sales, but we also have office people, industrial people. Myself, I still do transactions. I am a single tenant net lease representative for mainly buyers for the most part. I love finding buyers and helping them reposition assets on their investments to achieve the goals that they're trying to do on their investment goals and or even life goals sometimes. And so I that's actually probably the funnest part of the job as opposed to a lot of the management and the other stuff. But we also sponsor syndications as well as um, working with international clients coming into town, into the United States to expand them throughout the U.S. We have 27 affiliate offices around the country.
Oh, okay, so you're not just, call it the California, you're basically spread throughout.
Well, we spread throughout. We have the ability to transact in all 50 states. I
Okay.
myself, I think I've done 38 states. I want to retire once I hit all 50. Of course, surprisingly, Hawaii wasn't that hard, but Alaska and North Dakota, wow. Hard to find some good
So,
investment properties for a lot of my clients up in those areas.
so I actually, it's funny you mentioned that too, because people ask us, like, with our note business, how many states? I'm like, 42. And they're like, wow, you know that? I'm like, because I want to get to 50. And I can
Yeah.
actually tell you the states, Alaska, Hawaii, North Dakota, South Dakota,
Yep.
Oregon, Washington. And so I can tell you the states that I haven't been in yet. And, I want to get to, but like you
Exactly.
mentioned,
Yep.
I actually have somebody for you in North Dakota who, has got some investments up there that I could
All
always
right.
connect you with. So trying to
Absolutely.
knock one off your list for you. You've been around the block, and been around for a long time. What's something about your journey that is either whether unique, a learning experience, just, share something with all that vast knowledge, something that people could take away.
Okay. Well, when I first started the industry, my first thought was ignorance is bliss. But ultimately, what I've really learned from that is, ignorance was bliss initially in my mind, but I realized that, it wasn't helping anybody or myself or my clients and really just the educational process. I think that agents that want to be productive and continue to be productive and maintain their clients and maintain the deal volume need to actually make it a part of their journey to be educated on what's happening new in the market. Whether, for instance, the average commercial real estate agent is about my age and they are white and they're male. That is on average the right now who is transacting in commercial real estate. The issues that we're finding is that, a lot of them don't adopt or are afraid to adopt some of the newest things, whether it's technology, whether it's marketing techniques, whether it's branding and things like that, or, like the newest stuff right now is AI. And so I think that ultimately through the journey and through the career, what I've learned is that number one, just like anything else, when it comes to the world, the survival of the most adaptable is going to be the one that's going to end up winning. So you have to be very adaptable. And part of that adaptability is just understanding where the trends are going, but also what other factors are coming into the industry that are going to influence how you do your business in the next 1, 2, 5 years, and make plans to incorporate that in. Whether it's AI avatars, whether it's, what are you looking to do and how can that work for me so that we are leading the pack, so to speak, or you're the ones trend setting and testing out new things. And that's always been our core philosophy behind that. And when it came to the real estate side, and that's pretty much, what we looked at. And really, it does adapt quite well to personal life as well. I always tell agents, new agents starting off, if you're going to wait to learn everything in the market, you'll never do a deal because after 30 odd years, I'm still learning stuff every day.
Yeah. No, and that's great advice because a lot of especially estate, companies may have been family or been around for a long time, and I'll use a phrase, old school way of doing things and not trying to adjust. And I know somebody who has been buying up some certain asset classes, and I think they see value add in ways of implementing some new technologies like building management systems and really analyzing where's the money going on
Mhm.
utilities and some of these other expenses and how to mitigate some of those. And all of a sudden, you got a big building, you bring your expense, utility and expenses down, a good chunk, everything's based off a cap rate and NOI. You start
Absolutely.
raising that, NOI goes up. They just, added value just by implementing some technology that could have been it could be a $10 million deal that they put $50,000 investment into that just made, added $1 million to $2 million in that investment.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that's one thing that a lot of investors that are starting off don't really understand or how to utilize the create or rather how to create that value. And for every dollar that you just mentioned the cap rate scenario, but ultimately what that really means to any investor is that for every dollar that is either saved or increased on the NOI, that will increase the NOI is equivalent to a 16 to $20 based upon current cap rates valuation on a property. You know, and that in itself is the power of that leverage in working in it. So you want to look at what can, one, make you more efficient, make it a little bit better, or even something as far as like watching out trending, what's happening in the trends. For instance, I used to do a lot of multifamily investing, and something as simple as dishwashers may not be as popular these days, but you know washing machines inside the unit would be fantastic. So you can take older buildings, and there are a couple of really good companies that make a washer dryer that works well, all in one, that fits right
Yeah.
in a dishwasher, and they only cost about $1,500. But what we do is we go in there and we say, we'll remove this dishwasher, but I'll put in a washing machine dryer set for an extra $50 a month.
Yeah.
Okay, that increases the value right there on that. $50 a month is $600 a year
Yeah.
on a cap rate basis. Multiply that by 15 times at the low end, 20 times.
Yeah.
It's a $12,000 increase for a $1,200 spend.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it on
Yeah.
investments, and also
And
not just on the investment side, but also when it comes to with our agents, like on the how can we incorporate that kind of leverage and the ability to be able to do stuff, whether it's utilizing new tools to become more efficient or whatever. So yeah, absolutely agree with you.
no, great points, and that's interesting about again. I agree with you that you find more people nowadays because a lot of people tend to who are renting also so I think spend more time eating out than they do actually using it. And now if you
Hmm.
have the washing, it's probably more washing of clothing is probably
Yeah.
more important than some of the dishes and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. And they're willing to pay that extra 50 a month just for
Yep.
the convenience, not having
Yep.
to pick up their clothes and walk
Yep.
down to the laundromat or or if your building's large enough, the laundry room there.
Yep. Another question I have is kind of more about your philosophies and if you have a core philosophy or principles that you live by and how you treat your investments, your partners, your clients, if there's anything there that you'd like to preach and speak about, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, a couple. I mean, when you talk about clients and things, and investment strategy is probably the core investment strategy is a little bit different. But when it comes to our clients and when it comes to people that we work with and things like that, ultimately the way I look at it is, can I add value? Can I help them? And, I mean, it kind of goes along the lines of the investment strategy as well as how can I add that value and whatnot. But at the same time, it really goes back to, the old school mentality of do the right thing. Or I think there was a book that was quite popular about 20, 25 years ago called Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, and which is
Yeah.
the golden rule: treat others like you want to be treated. And
Yep.
surprisingly, if you follow that rule, it's amazing how many other little life issues do not pop up. But, as a reminder, we have a holding company, and, you had mentioned the coffee, but, I have a mug here or coffee cup says Pono Asset Management. That's our holding company, and Pono is the Hawaiian word for essentially to do the right thing. So we're always looking for socially responsible investing opportunities, giving back to the community and things like that. Now, as an investment philosophy, I think one of the ones that is probably a little unique and different than most others out there is that, and this is what I tell my clients as well. The reason I bought this property is as an investment. So I should be looking at it every year and making sure that it's performing as good as any other asset that may be out there that's another opportunity. It doesn't matter whether the market's down or whether the market's up or what I paid for that property, because ultimately I'm looking at the returns. And so if it makes sense for me to sell that property, even at a small loss, if I can exchange it into a better property that's going to give me a better return, whether it's a cash flow or appreciation play or whatever it may be, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to wait till I can turn a profit of $1. I can sell this now. Instead, I'm looking at my personal investment saying, you know what? This one's performing well, but if I sell it and buy this one, it's going to perform a whole lot better, my money. So always take a look at your assets and what you're working with and make sure that they're performing as well as other opportunities in the market.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to somebody about that, and I think a lot of investors miss that point.
Yeah,
And I was
most
speaking
do.
with, yeah, and I was speaking with somebody about, and I've worked, many years at a W-2, and they're working a W-2 and stuff. And I told them, I'm like, your investments are just like a job. If you've got a better opportunity that can come up, that is
Hmm.
better for you from whether personal, financial, like you evaluate one versus the other. And it's
Hmm.
like, okay, do I stick with this one or do I make the leap? And of course, the similar risks of the one you have, you kind of know what you're getting, what's getting involved and what needs to be done or whatever case. And this new asset slash job, you're basing it off of certain information and certain due diligence you have. I'm like, it's very similar.
Yeah,
it's, and stuff. And that's
absolutely.
how you kind of should look at it is if you're going to sell an investment, just don't sell it to sell it, just like you just don't move a lateral job just to move. There's got to be some type of reason, whether it's the time, or whatever the case may be, but also you got to look at it long term. And if you're going to take a loss on something, it's still okay because you're moving to something that can potentially recoup it and grow. Where my construction management background, I used project when I was project manager, the hardest projects were the ones that were, not only were they not making a ton of money, but they're most challenging because contractors go out of business, tough owner. The ones that went well, those were easy. Probably, learn as much on those, of
Mhm.
course. You got to make sure sometimes you make that shift. And
Yeah.
people, like I mentioned, people
Yeah,
miss it a lot.
it's a slight, it's keeping your eye on the goal and what your end goal is, I
Yep.
think. It's not investments shouldn't be a set it and forget it type of thing where, ultimately when it comes to the investment side, especially with us, I always buy with the intent for my personal assets, I should say, not necessarily syndications or sponsoring
Yeah.
deals, but on personal assets, I'm always buying to hold. That being said, I'll always, at any time, sell any one of my properties if it makes sense to do so.
Yep.
And I'm always continually looking at it. I mean, I may not actively be going out and putting the property on the market unless I determine that, hey, here's the opportune time. The investment horizon is kind of ending for this particular investment. I need to move on to something different. But generally speaking, I mean, the last asset I sold 72 units in Texas, we weren't going to sell it. And somebody came up to us and offered a substantial increase in the price versus what we had paid for it about 7 years previously. But our intent was actually to redevelop and add some units onto it. It was a much larger property. We figured we could add approximately 18 additional multifamily units and create the value that way and then go out through that route. The offer he put in front of us essentially had all of our profit. So I immediately said yes.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I get my profit, I get my returns, and no risk. Sold. And I wasn't going to wait and say, "Hey, this is." I was going to redevelop it. I wasn't going to say, "No, I'm not going to take this offer because," and I'm not going to sell it until I redevelop it. It made sense to sell it at that point, so we did.
yep. No, we've again recently sold a personal asset as well that we weren't looking to sell it, but all of a sudden the opportunity came and somebody reached out and stuff. And,
Yeah.
they own the property next door and they were interested in this one as well. And basically it was like, make an offer. And
Yeah.
then they made an offer and I was like, okay, that's actually, it wasn't a lowball investor, type of offer. It was like a
Yeah.
real offer. And I'm like, great, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we closed, I think 2 months ago on it. And it's like,
Fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
See,
So,
I think that's how you have to kind of look at it. Always be open to the opportunities that may come out, but you have to vet it out.
yeah.
And I think that goes with almost anything in life. But, if we want to core down to that philosophy that you're talking about in general. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about people, not making shifts or whatnot. What's another area where you see, I'll call it, people who are newer to the business make mistakes that, you might be able to help them try and avoid, or just that you see a lot of people making that you're just like, oh man, I wish they would have done something.
Well, a lot of times they look at, I mean, I think the biggest mistake for newer investors coming into it is they get focused on one metric, meaning cap rate. I need a cap rate that's going to be 6.5% on this transaction. I need six and a half cap, 6.5 cap, 6.5 cap. And even if I put a 6.4 in it, some of those investors won't even look at it. But what they're losing sight of is there's reasons why their properties have higher cap rates. And when you're looking at an investment strategy, an investment item, I mean, you have to, more importantly than the acquisition, it's the exit strategy. How are you going to exit? What are your assumptions on exiting? When the lease is over, am I going to be able to exit out of this particular property that may have a higher cap rate, but or are the leases even sustainable when it comes time to renew those leases? Taking a look at the whole picture as to why it is and where it is there. I think that's the biggest mistake that a lot of newer investors look at. They just look at, hey, it's a cap rate. So you have A lot of investors buying tertiary properties or markets because they think they have a really strong tenant base, like a Dollar General or one of the dollar stores, something along those lines. And in reality, those rents may not be sustainable in that market when the lease comes due,
Yeah.
and they're going to be
Or,
hurt down the road, whether it's 4, 5, 7 years down the road.
or the other thing we've seen in our area is when you've got those Dollar Generals or some of those bigger blocks in the, strip mall locations, if they've got 10,000 square feet, next thing you know, you're breaking that up into 3 and 4,000 or 2,500 foot spaces because nobody's leasing that big a space anymore.
Yeah,
And so that's one. The other one with cap rates that, when I speak to people about too is ignore the fact that, yeah, it's a great cap rate, but your roof's only got 5 years left to it. You might have to, the uh, the parking area may have to get redone, or some of the HVAC systems may need to be replaced. There's other components to
yeah.
the building that have significant capex that you got to make sure that you account for that coming down in the next 5 years, which is going to have a serious impact on your numbers.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't take a look at that. And I think the other one of the biggest connections or issues that we run into a lot of times is that not just the cap rate issue, but also what am I going to, how is my investment performing and not looking at the whole picture, as in, not taking into account if I exchange and go into something larger, I'm going to have a little bit more tax benefits, and that's actually more cash in my pocket with depreciation, things like that. If I can raise the basis, or even potential for bonus depreciation, where I've had clients, especially with we had properties back in 2017, 18 that were coming online that were 100% bonus depreciation, and it was phasing out. The new big beautiful bill that was passed
Yep.
previously reinstated that. So there's a lot of properties that are out there, and for the right individual, that works out perfectly for them and can be returned substantially more. I mean, I've even have investors that have invested in zero cash flow properties that or ZCFs that the yields are still 11, 12%, and it's a safe potential investment depending on what they're looking to do and how their finances look. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there, but not looking at the end goal and figuring out what exactly you're trying to accomplish and not letting your broker or agent know that, then that agent, you're taking away half the power of that agent, which is being able to advise you on
Yep.
what are the best opportunities for you to achieve those goals.
As we start to enter and wrap up this episode, I do like to do a quick, I call it lightning round, which nothing ever with me is lightning because I love to talk. But if you were in a few words to describe the current real estate market, how would you describe it?
Military term, fog of war. A lot of stuff going on from multiple directions, and it's really hard to see what's happening. And also, there's a lot of outside influences that haven't had as big of an impact as of yet that they still may, like such as the tariffs. A lot of the issues and spending hasn't even hit because it really, even though they went into effect back in April, people were holding back and forth. And we really first started seeing on the retail side tariffs starting to take effect in sales in June, end of June, July. So it's still a little early though to really see how is that going to play out. Is the consumer confidence going to come back? We're also seeing that with across the board though, there's a lot of money that's ready and willing to come in and step in to invest into properties. It's just that they're a little bit concerned. I think there's a lot of construction also that's been slowing down, mainly because the ideas of cost of construction, except for certain markets. I mean, some markets, obviously, you know, uh, New York and Florida, New York for the first time since COVID had a positive, more people in the office than they had out of the office. Meanwhile, so other submarkets like Los Angeles, we're still down 34% from the height of people going into the office pre-COVID than today. Seeing those changes in the market, it's hard to see where it's coming, but I think we're seeing a lot more less gray skies and more blue skies, because I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just that people aren't sure exactly where to put their money yet, because there's a lot of stuff that's also going on.
Yep. No, I love that fog of war example. And I think one thing people forget about is because a lot of today's society is based on everything being so instantaneous and happening immediately. And, the interesting component to that is real estate is like a train, and it's like it moves, but it's, what happened 3 or 4 months ago, you're finally starting to see today, and people forget, like, yeah, properties that are under agreement 45 days ago or what's closing today. A lot can happen over 45 days or even more. And like you said,
Even longer, yeah.
tariffs, taxes, interest rates, just because if rates go up or down today, that really doesn't get felt for a little bit more down the
About 3,
road.
4 months, yeah,
Yeah, yep, at a
for
minimum.
in the
So.
commercial realm.
Yep. Yeah, and you look back at 2008, which was, end of late 2008 when Lehman went under, but really real estate, I think the worst peak, I think may have been like 2010 maybe. I mean, it kept going down, but in certain markets, but it wasn't immediately at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's a lot of mindset as well. I mean,
Mhm.
meaning, one of the things when I do a lot of training with different agents, and one of the things I've always mentioned is that, business doesn't stop. It's not like it's a consumer in the sense that, hey, you know what? My income's a little bit lower, so I'm going to stop going out to eat. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop buying things.
Yeah.
Business grows, it keeps going. Even during downtimes, there are companies that are expanding and companies contracting, which allows
Yep.
opportunity. So it's more about the adaptability again, going back to that, with the agents being able to see where the opportunities lie. Whether it's growth in down markets for certain types of companies, or it might be downsizing for other types, but you can match those together and it's now a win-win situation that you just created, and you look like a rock star because you just did this during a down market. And in reality, it's just identifying who needs what.
Yep. Well, George, thanks for coming on today. If people want to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way for somebody to reach out?
Best way is actually probably just via email. And, it's gpino at cbicommercial.com. And that's usually the fastest, easiest, quickest way to get a hold of me.
Great. Thanks for coming on today, and
Absolutely.
look forward to speaking with you in the future.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
In this episode of the Paper Trail podcast, I interview George Pino with CBI Commercial. It was a great conversation where we dive back. I got to dive back into some of the old war stories that I used to deal with in commercial real estate, where George is a commercial broker, got offices across the United States, but really shared some just overall philosophies on investing. And one that really kind of hit home is in regards to people always wondering the next deal and understanding how to get out of a deal into a new deal. So we talk a little bit about that, talk about the economy. I love this term fog of war in regards to the type of environment that the current markets we're in right now because of so many external components impacting real estate. It really has an impact of people don't know. And it's kind of like you're in a fog, just waiting for it to clear, see, the dust to settle and see what happens. So hope you enjoy this episode that I did with George Pino of CBI Commercial. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Paper Trail. I hope today's insights help you sharpen your note investing strategies. If you found value in this conversation, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow investors. I'm Chris 70, reminding you to keep doing the work, trust the process, and always follow the paper trail. Until next time.